Hi, so we're going to deploy an Azure load balancer with web servers and a jump server or a jump host. So let's take a look at this diagram, and this is similar to what we are going to do because here we have two servers that would depend on a load balancer, and we are going to have the jump server which should be able to be connected to the internet and should be able to connect to the servers, but the servers wouldn't have a public IP address. They will have private IP addresses, and all of this will be in subnet 1, which is going to be 172.16.0.0/24, and they will also be in a virtual network, which is 172.16.0.0/16. And the load balancer would be able to have access to the internet, and from there it would be able to grant access to the virtual machines, that's the virtual servers. Let's just see how to create this setup. So we're back on our Azure portal, and we're going to do all this from the CLI, that's from Cloud Shell. So the first thing we need to do is to create the resource group, and that will be AZ group. So this means AZ create a resource group, that's create, and the name of the resource group will be RG Lab 21, and the location will be East USA. So we'll click enter, and now our resource group has been created. So let's find out to make sure. So we'll type AZ group list order in table, and now we can see our resource group that has been created. So next we need to create the virtual network, and the virtual network is this vnet 172.16/16. So we're going to create this where all our devices are going to be within. So to do that, we'll say AZ network vnet create, and what this means is that we're using the Azure command. We're creating a virtual network because it's going to be a subset of network, so it's virtual network in network, and we're creating the resource group is the first thing we need to state. That's RG Lab 21, the name of the virtual network, which will be VNet Lab 21, and the location is East US, and the address prefix is going to be the network range of our virtual network, which is 172.16.0.0/16, and the subnet name, that means we're creating subnet 1, which is what we have here inside the network. So that subnet name is subnet 1, and the subnet prefix is the subnet range of IP, so that's 172.16.0.0/24. So press enter, and once that is done, we're going to confirm that our virtual network has been created. So say AZ network. So this is the AZ command, that's to go into the network, and then we go into the virtual network. Then we're going to show with the resource group, which is the first thing we have to state, then the exact virtual network, then we'll show in a tabular form. So enter, and this is what we have. The virtual network was created successfully, and that's the resource ID. But let me also just use this other command, which is AZ network vnet list, and in tabular form, and this will give us the list of all the virtual networks in the Azure account, and that's what we have here. We have the resource group specified as RG Lab 21, and the number of subnet 1, the prefix, we have that, and we have the name of the virtual network. So let's view our resource group and the virtual network which we created. So go to resource groups, and we can see our resource group lab 21, which we have created, and inside we have the virtual network lab 21, and we can see the address space, which is what we created, and we can see the subnets. If we go to subnet 1, and we can also see the IP range. So next we need to create a network security group, and that's going to be for our subnet 1, because we want to ensure that when we create these devices like the servers and the load balancer, we would be able to apply the network security group for these devices, and also we'll create network security groups for the virtual machines. That's the two of them that we are going to be creating. So we're going to have network security group created for the subnet 1 for all the devices like the virtual machines, and then we'll create the uh, individual network security group for the virtual machines. So let's do that first for this subnet 1. So to create the network security group, I'm going to say AZ, the same network, and we want NSG. So then we'll put create, then resource group. We're going to use the resource group and the name of the NSG. That's the NSG network security group for subnet 1 lab 21. So let's press enter, and now we've created that. So let's find out that we've been able to create that. So AZ network NSG list, then the resource group, and in tabular form. So now we can see our NSG subnet 1 lab 21 has been created. So let's view that from the portal. So we'll go to our resource group, and we'll go to resource group lab 21, and we can see our network security group for the subnet that we have created. And now we need to put in our network security rules for HTTP and SSH for our subnet, so that we can have access to the subnet 1 through HTTP and SSH. So we're going to do that next. And I'm going to create that AZ network NSG rule create, and I'm going to do that for the HTTP, that is port 80. So I'm going to first of all set the resource group, which is RG lab 21. Then I'll state the name, and it will be allow HTTP inbound. Then the NSG name, that's the NSG subnet 1 lab 21 in which we are creating the rule. Then the protocol is TCP. The direction is inbound, that's from the internet into the subnet 1. And the source address prefix, that is the all. So anybody, any IP address, I'm trying to access that. Source port range, any port. Destination address prefix, that's any. Destination port range, that is the HTTP, and the access is to allow, and priority will give it 200. So let's enter, and now it has created our network security rule. That's the first one for HTTP. So let's just view that. So I'm going to say AZ network NSG rule list, that is the group, resource group, NSG name, and we'll put it in tabular form. So let's see the rule that has been created in this NSG, and we can see allow HTTP inbound rule has been created. So let's go to the portal and just confirm that. So I'm going to click back on our NSG, and let's refresh. And now we can see our priority 200 allow HTTP inbound rule has been created. So let's go and create that for SSH for the subnet 1. So let me just clear screen. So I'm going to say AZ network NSG rule create, then the resource group, then this time we say allow SSH inbound, then the NSG name as energy for subnet 1 lab 21, the protocol TCP direction inbound, source address prefix, source port range, destination address prefix, and destination port range will be SSH. So access is to allow, and priority this time we'll make it 300. Okay. So now we've been able to create our network security group rule. So we're going to list the rule. So click enter. And now for our network security group subnet 1 lab 21, we have two rules that we have created, and that is HTTP and the SSH inbound. We can see priority 300. Let's see that from the portal. So we're going to go to the subnet, the NSG subnet, and we'll refresh. And now we can see that we've created our allow SSH inbound rule in priority, with priority 300. So let's go back. Next, we need to apply this NSG rule, that is NSG subnet 1 lab 21, which has the rules, the two rules we've created. We need to apply or associate it to our subnet 1, which it was created for. So if we are to do that on the portal, all we need to do is to go to the network security group. That's this. Then we'll go to subnets and we'll click associate. And we'll just select the particular subnet we need to connect it to. But this time we are going to come here and we'll say AZ network VNet subnet update. So we're going to update the subnet in the virtual network, and we specify the resource group, we specify the virtual network name, and we specify the subnet we want to update. And we'll say network security group. We're attaching this to that subnet, that is the SG subnet 1 lab 21. So press enter and it's been successful. So let's check out the subnets there. So AZ network, then virtual network, then subnet, subnet, then list, and we list with the resource group. We specify the virtual network and we'll put it in tabular form. And now we can see that we have our virtual network having a subnet, subnet 1, and we can see the resource group, and we can see the address prefix. But let's go to the portal, and we're going to go back to resource group, and we'll click on that. Then we'll click on the virtual network. Then we'll go to subnets, and now we can see subnet 1, and we can see here that subnet 1 has NSG subnet 1 lab 21. So the security group has been attached to subnet 1. So next we're going to create the load balancer, because we've created the network security group and we have attached it to the subnet 1 at subnet level. So we're going inside and we'll create the load balancer. But first, let's just create the IP, public IP address that the load balancer would have, so that it can access the internet. So let's do that now. So I'm going to say AZ network public IP create, and we'll put the resource group, the name, which we call pip01. Then the allocation is going to be a static IP that will be assigned SKU, that's the standard, and version is IP version 4. We'll press enter, and now it has been created. So let's find that out. So AZ network public IP list, and we'll put it in a tabular form. And now we can see we have one public IP as pip01 that is in resource group RG lab 21. Now we can see the IP address that is given us and is made to be static. So let's check it out from here, from the portal. So go to resource group lab 21, and now we can see it here, the public IP address. Let's just click on it and we can see what has been assigned: 104.45.148.162. So it's ready to be deployed. So next we need to go and create the load balancer. So let me just clear screen. So we'll create the load balancer and we'll say AZ network LB create as load balancer create. Then resource group will specify the name of the load balancer, LB lab 21. Then we have the SKU standard. Public IP address is the pip101 which we just created, and we stating that is a static IP address. And we are going to have our front end IP name as the pip01, and they will have a back end pool name as back end pool. That's where our two virtual machines are going to be called. So we'll press enter. And now it's created our load balancer, so we're going to check that out. AZ network LB list and resource group. So just cleared, and you can see it's clearer. This is our load balancer that has been created. So let's go and check that out, and if you come here you can see the load balancer, and we have front end IP configuration. Remember, we attached the pip01 to it, so that's what we have here. So we also have the backend pool that was created. So you can see backend pool where our virtual machines and servers are going to be located. So next we need to create the health probe. We can do that from here, or we're going to do that from bash terminal. So let's go and do that, and also we'll also create load balancing rules afterwards. So let's go create the health probe. So we'll come here and we'll say AZ, the same thing, network load balancer probe create, and the resource group we specify the load balancer name, which we already have, the name of the health probe, which will be HP health probe for the load balancer. Then the protocol interval is 5. That means it's going to every 5 seconds. It would check if there is connectivity, and the threshold 2 means that once it happens twice, then it will show that as a faulty connection. Then the port is HTTP. So press enter, and our health probe has been created. So we're going to type AZ network load balancer probe, so that we'll find out and list it. List, then the resource group, then the load balancer name. And now we can see the health probe load balancer lab 21 with 2 probes, 5-second interval, and we have our port 80, and we can see it's created successfully. So next, let's create our load balancer rule that will connect everything together. What I mean is, if we come back here, let's just go to the load balancer again and health probe refresh. We can see the load balancer health probe. If we click on it, we can see that. Then if we come to the load balancer rule, this will now will add our rule that will now connect the back end to the health probe, and also specify how our load balancer will function. So instead of adding here, I'm going to create it from here. So we'll type again AZ network LB rule create, then we'll specify the resource group, the load balancer name, the name of the load balancer rule, which is going to be LBR for load balancer rule, then the load balancer, then the protocol, which is TCP, then HTTP for the front end back end ports, then the front end IP name, which we already specified, that's for pip01, then back end pool, which is the back end pool name for our virtual machines. Then the probe name which we created earlier, that's the probe, is HP Health Probe Lab 21. So let's press enter. And now we can see that our load balancer has been created. So let's find that out. AZ network load balancer rule. So we're talking about the load balancer rule. Then we list and give the group the load balancer name, and we want it in tabular form. So press enter and we can see that our rule was created, and we can see succeeded, and the name is load balancer rule LB lab 21. And let's go back to the portal, go to load balancer, and let's refresh. And now we can have our load balancer rule, which now determines how the load balancer would function. Let's go back to this, and next we need to create our network security group for our virtual machine 1. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll create the HTTP rule and the SSH rule to permit that's on virtual machine 1. Then we'll connect the network security group rules to the network security group, which we are creating now for virtual machine 1. Then we'll connect this network security group to the virtual machine network interface card. And once we do that, then we create the virtual machine and now connect the card to the virtual machine. And we'll do that for virtual machine 2, and then we can now create the jump server. So let's do that now for virtual machine 1. So let's create the network security group. So we'll go back to our terminal. Let me just clear this. So to create the network security group for the virtual machine 1, we'll say AZ network NSG create. Then we'll specify the resource group, and the name is network security group VM1 lab 21. So press enter, and now it's successfully created our network security group. So we'll list that out, AZ network NSG list, and we specify the resource group. And now we can see that we initially created network security group for our subnet 1, but now we've created the network security group for our virtual machine lab 21. So if we come back here and go to resource groups, resource group 21, and we can see here, if we scroll here, that we have our network security group for the virtual machine. So next we need to create the rule so that it will allow HTTP and SSH access into the virtual machine. So let's go back. So I'm going to do the same thing, AZ network NSG rule, then create. Then we'll specify the network security group. The name of that is allow HTTP inbound. So we want to allow the HTTP into the virtual machine. Then the network security group name is the NSG VM1 lab 21, which we just created. Then the protocol with TCP, direction inbound, and the rest of the information. But we can see destination address prefix is a virtual network. In other words, we are making access to this machine which is in the same virtual network, and the destination port is 80, which HTTP allow, and priority 200. So let's press enter, and now that has been done. So let's list AZ network NSG role, then list, then the resource group, then the NSG name. And we can see we created the allow HTTP inbound rule. So let's go back here and we go to NSG for the VM1, and if we refresh, You can see allow HTTP inbound has been created. So let's go create that for the SSH. So do the same thing, AZ network NSG row, create resource group, then the name this time is allow SSH inbound, then we specify the network security group name, which is the NSG VM1 lab 21. Then we specify protocol direction inbound, and destination port is 22, which is SSH, allow priority 100. So press enter. And now we've created that. So let's do the same thing. AZ network NSG row list, then the resource group and the name of the NSG. And we can see the second one we created, allow SSH inbound. So let's check in the portal, click on the same virtual machine NSG and refresh, and we can see SSH has been created for our NSG. So what do we need to do next? So we've created the network security group, and we've created the network security rules for that network security group. So we need to connect the network security group to the virtual machine network interface card. So it means we need to create the network interface card for that and connect it to the card. So let's do that. So we'll come back to our terminal. Let me just clear. So to do that, I'll say AC network NIC, that's the network interface card. Then we create that. The resource group, the name, which is the NIC, VM1, so it's network interface card of VM1 lab 21. Then the VNet name as the virtual network lab 21, the subnet, which is subnet 1. So this network interface card or this VM is going to be located in the subnet 1. Network security group is what we are linking now to the virtual machine. So NSG VM1 lab 21. Then the load balancer name, which will be connected to this virtual machine, that's load balancer lab 21. And the load balancer address pools that it belongs to is the backend pool. So press enter. And now it's been created. The NIC for VM1 has been created. So let me just find that out. NIC list and the resource group. So we can see the NIC VM lab 21 was created for resource group lab 21. So let's go back to the portal and let's go to resource groups and RG lab 21, and we can see the NIC VM has been created. So network security group option, and we can see network security group none, so we can attach it here if we want. So well, let's just do that because we meant to have the network security group for the subnet 1 attached to the NIC. So let's go to network security group VM1, and we can see it has 2 inbound rows created. So click on network interfaces. So we see the NIC which we created, and we can see it's been associated to the network security group. And we can see the IP configuration, that is subnet 1 it belongs to, and we can see the IP address 172.16.0.4. So we can make it static and save. So next we need to create the virtual machine itself. So that's this virtual machine. So go back and let's just clear this screen. So say AZ VM create, then we'll specify the resource group. The name of the virtual machine is VM1. The network interface card is that which we created for VM1. You put the username and the password, and the image will be a Linux system, and the public IP address will be none. So it's going to be a private IP address which we specified. So press enter, and that's done. So let's find out AZVM list RG lab 21, and then table and in detail. So we can see our RG lab 21 virtual machine, which is VM1, has been created. So let's go back and let's go to resource groups, RG lab 21, and we can see our virtual machine. Our virtual machine created, so we can see is using public IP address. And what public IP address is that? That is meant to be for our load balancer. So let's find out if that is true. So search for load balancers. We can see our load balancer. We'll click on that, and if we come here, we can see our public IP address for our load balancer is 104.45.148.62. And if we go to virtual machine, that is exactly what we have here. So we can confirm with that our virtual machine 1 is connected to load balancer backend, and it should have access to the internet through our load balancer. So let's check on the network properties, networking, and we can see the network interface. We can see it has no public IP, so it's using that of our load balancer. We can see the private IP, that's the 0.7, and we can see our network security group rules. This first is for the NIC for the VM1. So that's what we have here. We allowed SSH and HTTP, and the next level is the subnet level, which is higher, and that's what we have here. We allowed HTTP and SSH too. So this virtual machine is working. So next we need to install our web server so that we can have something display on the web page anytime we access the load balancer, or that's anytime we access the virtual machine through the load balancer using the load balancer's IP address. So let's do that. So come here and let me just clear. So I'm going to install the Apache web service as an extension. That's AZ VM extension set. Then we will have that from Microsoft Azure extensions, and we can see the details. Our virtual machine is 1, and we're also going to have this echoed on our web page. That's default web page. This is a web server for lab 21 VM. So I've pressed enter to deploy it. So our web server has been created. So next, let's view that. So AZ VM list and the group and the name. That's for the VM. So we can see our custom script extension was installed, and the Apache web server was deployed. So it means we should be able to have access to VM1 web server. So let's go to our load balancer, and we're going to use the IP address from this copy, and let's open it in our browser. And now we can see this is a web server for lab 21 VM1. So we have our web server running. So what that means is that we've successfully created this network that goes this way. So next we need to create the virtual machine 2, and remember we need to first of all create the network security group for the virtual machine 2. Then we create the network security group rules for HTTP and SSH. Then we'll link those rules with the network security group, and then we connect the network security group to the network interface card of VM2. Then we'll connect the network interface card to create the virtual machine 2, and then we know that we are done with that, and we'll go ahead to create our jump server. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to clear this. So let's create our network security group for VM2. And that has been created. So we're going to search that out. And now we can see that we have specified our NSG for our virtual machine 2, along with that which we created for the virtual machine 1 and the subnet 1. So next we need to create the network security group rules for the NSG VM2. That's the network security group for the VM2. And that is done. So let's check that AZ network. And now we can see it listed the role in this network security group, which we just created, HTTP inbound. Let's check for that. So go to resource groups, RG Lab 21, and let's look for our NSG for VM2. That's this. Click on that, and now we can see we've created our first role, HTTP. So let's create the second one for our NSG for the virtual machine 2. So do the same thing, AZ network NSG rule. And now that one has been done, so let's search the list of rules now. And now we can see the two of them that was created. The first one, the HTTP, now the SSH. And if we come back here and click on our NSG for VM2 and refresh, we can now see SSH has been created. Allow. So next we need to create the network interface card. That's for this VM2. Since we've created the NSG and we've created the NSG rules for that NSG, we need to create the network interface card and connect the NSG to the NIC network interface card. Then we can now create the virtual machine. So now it's been created, and let's search that out to know the NICs that we have created. And let's search that out. So now we can see two network interface cards we created, the first for VM1 and then the second for this VM2. So now we can create the virtual machine 2 with this NIC. So let's do that. So we'll clear the screen and we'll say AZ VM create. And now we've successfully created the virtual machine. So let's list AZ VM lists. And now we can see our two virtual machines that are currently deployed and running, VM1 and VM2. And let's come out from here and go to virtual machines. We can see virtual machine created too and running. Both of them are running, and we can see they both have the same IP address. So next we need to install Apache server into virtual machine 2 so that we can have something to view at the same time. So we'll go back here, but let me just make sure that we have networking network card installed, which is what we have here, and our rules have been applied, as we can see. So let's go back. And now we have installed Apache. So let's just find out the extension we used. So AZ-VM extension. And now we can see we installed the custom script extension. So successfully we've created the virtual machine 2, and let's just click on virtual machine 2 and let's go to overview, and we'll take this IP, which is the load balancer's IP address. We'll come here and paste and go, and we can see this is web server lab 21 VM1. This shows that our load balancer is working currently. If we refresh, now we can see VM2. So our load balancer is evenly distributing traffic to VM1 and VM2. So it means that we've successfully created a complete link to our VM1, VM2, and balanced by the load balancer from traffic from the internet. So finally, we need to just create our jump server. So let's create this to be able to have direct access to our web server when our load balancer is down. So we'll come back to the Azure Cloud Shell. Let's clear. And I'm going to just create that AZ-VM create, and the resource group is the same. The name is the jump station. We can call it jump host or whatever, or jump server. Then the username, the password is going to be Linux, and we have the virtual network it belongs to and the subnet, and we'll create a static IP address for it so that it can have access to the internet and we can have access to it through SSH. So let's do that. Enter. So that is done. Let's list the VMs. So VM lists, and now we have our jump station created with a public IP address of its own, and the VM1 and VM2 has been created. So we have the complete setup has been created. So let's just go and check just to make sure that we have access to all our devices. So that is it, the jump station, VM1, VM2. So let's go to jump station so I can see the private IP address, which is .0.6.6. Then we'll go back to VM1. Let's see, the private IP address is .0.4, and that of VM2. Let's see, the private IP address is .5. So VM1.4, VM2.5, and our jump station .6. So let's just go and try and see if we can SSH into that, into the workstation. So I'll connect through SSH, copy, and yes, the password. So I'm connected, and now let me ping VM1, and now we have access to VM1, and let me ping VM2, and now we have access to VM2. So we can see that we have access to both VM1 and VM2, and it means that we've successfully created our network and everything is working fine.